This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation, The Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. It's that man, Julian Assange, again, the long-running saga, the man who has been in the Ecuadorian embassy now for over 5 years. Well, his case was once again at Westminster Magistrates Court, and Senior District Judge Emma Arbuthnot gave us some rulings today. And there, for LBC, was Lucy Hough, one of our reporters. Lucy, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. Yes, the judge certainly didn't hold back this afternoon. She gave a damning critique of Julian Assange's case to have his arrest warrant withdrawn in front of a packed courtroom at Westminster Magistrates Court. His lawyers had, in a hearing last week, presented a 5-point plan arguing for his release. Their key arguments were about the public interest of his case, that his years inside the Ecuadorian embassy should be considered adequate punishment for his actions, and that the UN has ruled that he's being arbitrarily detained. But the judge this afternoon dismissed these arguments, working through them one by one. She said he was restricting his own freedom, pointing out that he can eat whenever he likes. He has access to a balcony and a mobile phone, conditions that certainly wouldn't be available to him in prison. And she also said that his health problems, a bad tooth, a bad shoulder, and mental health problems caused by living in such a small room in the embassy could be much worse. And she wrapped up by urging him to have the courage to appear in court. So a fairly brutal assessment, and one that means the arrest warrant still stands. That was issued in 2012 for a violation of the terms of his bail. Now, Mr. Assange has always said that if he faced the judicial system here, he'd then be sent to the US to face charges related to the activities of WikiLeaks. But today, the judge said he thwarted the course of justice and should face the consequences of his action at home.
Now, I completely understand, Lucy, that, he's broken bail here, and if he steps outside the Ecuadorian embassy, he will have to face those charges. But he wouldn't actually get a terribly severe sentence for doing that, I wouldn't have thought. I could be wrong. But it's the American dimension of this that I still find a bit of a mystery. Was there any hint or any clue today of any kind at all from District Judge Emma Arbuthnot as to whether or not the Americans have an extradition warrant out for him or not?
Well, I think the clearest message we've had on this is from the lawyers for Mr. Assange himself. They say the risk of extradition to the US has always been the real issue in this case, and they're sure that the Department of Justice in the US still wants to press charges against Julian Assange related to the actions of WikiLeaks. And they say there's been no confirmation here in the UK about whether a secret extradition warrant exists. They say the UK has refused to confirm or deny this. And there was little sympathy, I think, from the judge here about that issue this afternoon. She said quite simply that he was attempting to thwart the course of justice and that he should have the courage to appear in court.
Yes, OK, Lucy Hough, thank you very much indeed for that. Well, the judge there, very clear, Assange should have the courage to come out and face justice. And I think I would say that he should have the courage to come out and face justice for jumping bail in this country. Yes, I agree with her on that. But surely, in the interests of fairness, should he not be told whether there is, out there, already issued, an extradition request from the American authorities? Because that would be facing a very different kind of justice. And WikiLeaks, of course, has been pretty embarrassing to many government organisations and individuals in the United States of America. I don't know whether they've issued this extradition request or not. I simply don't. But it's all well and good for the judge to say he should have courage, but is it courage to face British courts over jumping bail, or is it the courage to potentially be taken off to America? Because they are two very different things. And I very much stand by the view that the judge here should have been transparent on that issue. That's my view. Tell me what you think by calling 0345 6060 973. Should he have the courage, to quote the judge, to come out into the sunlight, well, if he's lucky with the weather the way it is, but to come out of the Ecuadorian embassy and to face justice? And you can, of course, text to 84850. You can tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. And, of course, you can watch us on Facebook and comment there too. And Sandy is on the line, a new caller from Hackney. Good evening, Sandy.
Hi. Well, I think I hope I can do this justice. Those rape charges were obviously trumped up. We don't know what happened to the women.
These were
Sandy.
Sandy, just for listeners, because this is complicated. This was the original request for him to be extradited to Sweden, who'd issued a European arrest warrant, but that has now all been dropped.
Yeah. So, why has it been dropped? Anyway, I think there was a complicated thing between Sweden and America, because America were after Julian Assange. He made a video that may still be on YouTube called Collateral Murder, which showed American soldiers in a helicopter shooting innocent people who were on the way taking their children to school. I think it was in Iraq. Anyway, that was a very vivid. Those pictures came from one of the WikiLeaks files, and Julian Assange was able to decode them and turn them into a video, which I believe is still on.
Do you think, Sandy? I mean, Sandy, with WikiLeaks, do you think he was doing the world a favour by putting all this information out, or was he potentially actually putting at risk American and perhaps British security?
No, I think that was a put-up job as well, saying all that. Have you seen the Pentagon Papers? Have you seen The Post, the Spielberg film? I mean, there's shades of that. That was a true story, and we can see how America behaves when people go against its power. So Julian Assange would just be. I think he'd be hooded and pushed into a helicopter, and it would be extraordinary rendition. That's what would happen to him. There wouldn't be any nice thing in the courts. He'd disappear. He'd be disappeared, and he knows it. Why do you think he's in?
So as it is, well, that's no. I mean, we know why. We know why.
We know why. People don't know that side of it.
No.
They don't know how.
No, he took amnesty. No, I mean he went into the Ecuadorian embassy not because I don't really think because of the Swedish charges. It was because he did directly fear being taken to America. I think that's absolutely
so
right.
Would I? Wouldn't you?
I'd be absolutely terrified. Of course I would.
Yeah, exactly.
In America,
there'd be no mercy. Just go watch the film, The Post, and see what they got up to.
So, Sandy, given where we are today, given that the UK judge has made clear that he would be arrested as soon as he steps outside of the Ecuadorian embassy by the UK authorities, and given there's no declaration on what the situation is with America, is he going to be stuck in there forever?
I don't know.
Nor do I.
I cannot understand that judge doesn't have a broader picture of what's going on here and how she could be so. You
feel, Sandy, you feel a certain sympathy for Assange, don't you?
Of course I do. He's a maverick, and he's done he's got a bit of an unusual character that's easy to have a go at. You know, people love to hate him.
Oh, I know all about that.
The Guardian actually put that up. You know, they let us down on that one for reasons beyond my understanding.
Okay, no, Sandy, listen, Sandy, thank you for your call. And Sandy there does feel a bit sympathetic for Assange, fears that he'll be taken off to the States with a hood over his head and treated pretty badly. That's her fear. Nick is a new caller from Preston in Lancashire. Good evening, Nick.
Hi, Nigel. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. So, what should Assange do? Is the judge right? Should he simply have the courage to step out into the streets of Knightsbridge?
He's got a tag on his head, hasn't he? He's got a massive tag on his head. The American intel agencies, they want him. They want him in behind bars. They'll bang him up for the rest of his life with a 999-year sentence. He's the king of whistleblowers, isn't he? So...
Yes, he certainly is.
If it was me, I wouldn't be sticking my head out of that embassy.
All right.
Because of a simple reason, you know damn well he'll be arrested. While he's in custody, there'll be an application for extradition. That'll keep him in custody. Then he's gone.
I mean, Nick, whistleblowers can do good.
Yeah, they can. Yeah,
but equally, it is argued that some of that information that came out through WikiLeaks actually endangered the lives of American agents around the world and perhaps led to the death of some of them. I mean, do you, on balance, think WikiLeaks is a good thing or a bad thing?
I think WikiLeaks is a great thing myself.
Do you?
I've read loads of documents on WikiLeaks. The stuff that you'll never, ever see the light of day of. They won't ever tell you the truth of what's gone on in Benghazi, for starters.
Yeah.
You know yourself, Nigel, you mix with the people. There's an element that runs this world that if they want something to happen, it happens.
Well,
so you end up with people going to Julian Assange who've maybe had a prang of conscience. Yeah?
Okay.
And
But Nick, I hear what you're saying. And look, in terms of how the world works and how big business and big money and big banks and big politics all work together and generally get everything they want until they come up against the British electorate or perhaps the Trump campaign. But do you, Nick, not somewhere think there must be limits to what is put out into the public domain? Doesn't the state need some secrets to do its job and to protect us all?
It depends on the secret, Nigel, doesn't it?
It does, but I'm just saying to you that those that support WikiLeaks the strongest, and you're one of them, think everything should be in the public domain. I'm just saying whether you see any limits to that at all.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. Yeah, there are cases, especially when you're talking about covert operations, especially overseas, especially for British forces, American forces, in countries where we aren't really welcome, we're not really wanted, where our values and our way of life are completely opposed to their standards of living and their societal standards. There are times when, it should be kept quiet.
There have to be sometimes, I know, and one wonders actually whether the WikiLeaks operation respects that as well. But hey, Nick, last question. If you and I have this phone conversation in 5 years' time, would he still be in the Ecuadorian embassy?
Probably.
Yeah, I think so too. Nick, I thank you. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's now 7:15. Today, at Westminster Magistrates Court, District Judge Emma Arbuthnot says that Julian Assange should have the courage to come out of the Ecuadorian embassy and to face justice, knowing that he is going to be prosecuted in this country for jumping bail, but not knowing whether the Americans have, as he suspects, and many others do, an extradition warrant out for him because of the information put out by WikiLeaks. Andrew says on Facebook, surely Assange must be utterly bored inside the Ecuadorian embassy. Well, 5 years stuck in a couple of rooms is pretty grim, is it not? But he does get visitors, doesn't he? Pamela Anderson goes and visits him reasonably regularly. And of course, I visited him, which has led to some of the most extraordinary conspiracy stories I've seen about me in my life. We've reached the level where actually a committee on Capitol Hill was told, no, actually, we don't think Farage went there once. We think he was a regular visitor to the Ecuadorian embassy. I mean, how the most surveilled property in the United Kingdom, being visited by someone like me, who is reasonably well known for good or bad, could have escaped public attention, seemed to be beyond the person giving evidence. But of course, it fitted in to the great conspiracy theory and the idea that has now been put out there is that I, in fact, have been acting as the bagman. I've been running memory sticks between the White House and Assange, and it is complete and utter baloney. I actually went to meet him because LBC organised that meeting in the hope of doing a big interview with him. David is a new caller from Madrid. Good evening, David.
Good evening, Nigel. How are you?
I'm very, very well. So, does Mr. Assange lack courage, in your opinion?
Well, I think to a certain degree, yeah. I think he does lack a bit of courage to come out and face it. I do believe that he should. I do believe that he should be given clarity about the U.S. extradition.
Yes, I do too. I do.
Warrant. Yeah. I believe that he should have that, but I'm in no way a fan of Mr. Assange or WikiLeaks. I think they are. I think either he's playing a very malevolent game or he's very irresponsible. And my view is that I actually believe that he's found a problem within Western democracies, which I think is a real problem, that we have no sort of check on governments and with certain security services. I think there is a little gap that he's found which I think we need to sort of address in Western democracies. However, I really, really do not think that he is the solution to it. And it's almost like, because he hasn't been elected, he hasn't got any experience in terms of security or anything like this. So he doesn't know what he's releasing, and we don't know what he's releasing. And I think that is quite a poignant. It's quite an important point, that we don't know how the Russian government or the Chinese government are going to read those security files, because we just don't know. And I think that is a major issue.
He does highlight, David, doesn't he, through WikiLeaks, that nothing that is online, nothing that is on a computer, can ever genuinely be thought to be a secret.
Yes, and I think, well, see the thing. I don't know. I was just very much, because I listened to a debate with him and Douglas Murray, actually.
Yeah.
And Douglas Murray made some really fantastic points against Mr. Assange, and I think there really is. I mean, the clarity, and democracies aren't perfect. I really do think that, but I find, especially with WikiLeaks, I find there is certainly a very much an anti-Western, anti-American agenda, and I'm not saying that I don't think.
Well, that's why, David. That's why, David. Some on the left have seen him as a bit of a hero, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. And actually, ironically, so a lot on the libertarian right find him a lot of a hero. It seems to be a lot of.
I know. But David, in conclusion, you are very concerned about some of the things that he's done. But you, like me, think that court today should have come clean with him about whether there is a US extradition warrant.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
And see if he actually has the courage to face up to that as well.
That would take some courage, wouldn't it? Knowing what it is to go off to America on the kind of charges that he might face. David, I thank you for your call. Andrew says, I don't have a great deal of sympathy for Assange's whistleblowing WikiLeaks activities. He was and is well aware of the political and legal ramifications. Stuart says, Julian is better known by the public since being in the embassy than he was before. Gets more media time as well. I'm not sure that's a great deal of use to him, stuck in a couple of rooms in the Ecuadorian embassy. I've been in there. I wouldn't want to spend more than a couple of days there, I've got to tell you. Frank says, secrecy is key to national security. It is not for an individual to decide what should be exposed to the public and our enemies. He should face justice and answer for his actions. The law will then decide whether he breached the law. Well, look, it's pretty cut and dried, Frank, in this country. He jumped bail. He broke the law. And there is some penalty to pay for that. Of course there is. What he doesn't know is whether the Americans have got this warrant out for him or not. Now, Andrew is coming on from Docklands with a novel idea, I believe. Good evening, Andrew.
Yes, good evening, Nigel. My view is that, if they want to, Julian Assange wants to give testimony or whatever it is in front of this judge, why can't he have a video link, as so many of these hardened criminals can? If it's good enough for them, why couldn't he do that?
What do you mean, rather like Facebook Live now, is with all the people interacting here with LBC?
He could do anything like that. I mean, why does it have to be? They want it's quite clear that there's something else going on. Jumping bail isn't that serious a crime. I mean, what would it be if you'd committed a very serious offence? It's probably not going to be that for a minor offence.
No. I mean, he's jumped bail. It is against the law. If he turned up at the court, and he would get a punishment of some kind, but it wouldn't be severe. But Andrew, you really couldn't seriously suggest that somebody that is claiming asylum inside the Ecuadorian embassy could take part in a UK trial via video link?
Well, you could certainly give evidence. I mean, all it is it's a slap on the wrist kind of an offence, isn't it? I think, what would you get, a month added on your sentence if you were a hardened criminal? It's not. We're not talking about big league stuff here. So
no. Do you, Andrew? Do you? And I think your video link idea is fun, but it ain't ever going to happen. Do you think, as I do, that the UK authorities and the judge today should come clean about the US dimension of this?
Yes, of course. I mean, they'd have said straight away, no, that they will not extradite him. They could have given him, assurances, a written assurance. and that would have been it. The fact they haven't tells you they are exactly going to do that.
Yeah, that's what I think too.
Evidence, and why on earth would you come out and face the American justice system?
I know. No, I can see it. Andrew, I thank you. Bob from Barking says, good evening, Nigel. Shouldn't we be leaning on the Ecuadorian embassy? I trust that Ecuador isn't in receipt of any of our foreign aid. Oh, Bob, you got me there. Is Ecuador getting any UK foreign aid? Well, most countries in the world are, so it probably is. I'll try and check that during the next break. I'm going to go to John in Glasgow. Good evening, John. Should Assange have the courage to walk out into the sunshine of Knightsbridge?
Indeed, because it's clouding his judgment. He needs to get out more.
Right.
I mean, the judiciary in this country...
I like that. That's very good.
The judiciary in this country are never going to extradite Assange to Donald Trump's America. They used to have President Obama. They've now got Donald Trump. It would be regarded as cruel and unusual punishment by our judiciary in this country, and that's why Julian Assange needs a new legal team. He's spent longer in there serving his sentence than Manning, Bradley or Chelsea has done in the United States. He's the original source of this, who had their sentence commuted by President Obama. So if he doesn't get excused extradition on health grounds, which is a point I made once before, it'll be on the basis, and if his brief's any good, that extradition to Donald Trump's America, a president who is not regarded as a suitable person to visit this country, why would we as a country and our judiciary feel it appropriate to extradite Julian Assange to Donald Trump's America?
But John, you're talking about our closest intelligence and military ally in the world.
They don't want him. It's too much trouble, Nigel. And at the end of the day, if Obama can commute to Manning's sentence, then all he needs to do, if worst comes to worst, is ask Her Majesty the Queen for a royal pardon or Donald Trump for a presidential pardon, and the job will be sorted.
And do you think Trump would do that?
I think so. Why not? At the end of the day, Obama has pardoned the source of all this, which was Bradley Stroke Chelsea Manning. Didn't pardon him, but the sentence was commuted. And I would point out that Assange has already spent almost as long in captivity in the Ecuadorian embassy as Manning did in detention in the United States.
I know. Well, John, it's a very interesting point of view that you put. I don't see a UK court not extraditing him if there is a warrant from the Americans. I don't think that's right, but it's an interesting point of view. I thank you. Nigel, you were cited several times visiting Assange wearing a fake tash and a bowler hat. This is Nick on Twitter. And one of my paid-up members of my fan club here says, put you in the Ecuadorian embassy and let Assange go free. Well, that's very, very sweet of you, whoever you are. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's now 7:30. District Judge Arbuthnot tells Westminster Magistrates Court that Julian Assange needs to have the courage to come out of the Ecuadorian embassy and to face up to what he's done, namely jumping bail and face the consequences for it. Well, I think he would do that at the drop of a hat, but he won't do it. All the while he thinks there may well be an American extradition warrant for him because of what was published on WikiLeaks. And so it would seem tonight that we're kind of stalemated again with him stuck inside that embassy. He's been there for over 5 years, and I can't see any prospect of him wanting to leave it quickly. But do you think he should have the courage? And also, do you think that the UK authorities and the judge today should actually be a bit fairer and a bit clearer with Assange in saying whether the Americans have or have not made this request? But before I get to that, very interesting today, Unilever has threatened to withdraw its advertising from online platforms such as Facebook and Google if they fail to eradicate content which creates division in society and promotes hate and anger. And of course, Unilever, massive company, big brands, Dove, Magnum, Persil, Marmite, and it's very, very interesting that they are taking this stand. Now, quite how they will judge, because it's subjective, what does and does not create division remains to be seen. But definitely, we are beginning to see advertisers right across all commercial aspects of our life beginning to take slightly more political stances, I think I would say. Spokesman for Unilever said, "We cannot continue to prop up a digital supply chain, one that delivers over a quarter of our advertising to our consumers, which at times is little better than a swamp in terms of its transparency." And I think that story is something you're going to hear a lot more of over the course of the next few years. Scott is a new caller from Manchester. Good evening, Scott.
Hi, Nigel. Are you doing all right?
I'm doing all right. So, was that judge today being fair? Was she right in what she said about Assange?
No, I don't think she was being fair at all, because at the end of the day, Julian Assange should not be prosecuted for leaking, telling the truth to the people. And to be quite frank, I'm just getting sick and tired of virtual signalling leftists who listen to DJ Refreshing Beverage on SoundCloud. I'm just getting sick of it.
and of course, Assange himself, of course, did not steal this material. This material was stolen by people like Bradley, now Chelsea Manning.
Free Bobby Schmurder.
You know, I mean, this was handed. Off you go. Go on. Right, going to go to Tony in Enfield. Tony, he's stuck inside the embassy. He's back in there tonight. I don't see any prospect of him leaving soon. Do you?
He's got the courage to go to court. It would be pure stupidity. He'll never see the light of day. And if the British government had the information that the United States was not interested in extraditing him to the United States, he would have known about it. And in my mind, it's 99.9%. He will be extradited to the United States. And let's get a bit of balance in this, Nigel. You know, they're our biggest ally. It's the biggest bully on the planet. When Margaret Thatcher was on her knees to Ronnie Reagan to stop the financial support to NORAD, completely ignored. When they invaded Grenada, a Commonwealth island, how did number 10 Downing Street find out? Reuters phoned the press office and said, inform the Prime Minister, the United States has just invaded Grenada, and this is our ally, this is our great, you know, we should stand, we ain't got the backbone or the spunk to stand up to the Americans, say, go away, this man should be released. And as for this judge, I don't know how she sleeps at night. I'll tell you what, Nigel, I'm ashamed to be British. There's no compassion. It's me, a selfish society. This man he's in prison. It's a form of imprisonment. And the British people, I think they're more balanced, and we do have a sense of justice and all the rest of it. And I think if we had a vote on it from John O'Groats to Land's End, 90% would say he should be released.
Do you think they would? Do you really think they would, Tony?
Yes, absolutely, because you know
when he did, and he may not have stolen the stuff himself, but he put out information that may well have endangered the lives of British and American agents. Because whatever you say about America, and by the way, you know, the invasion of Grenada, etc., back in the 80s was, you know, appalling behaviour from what should be a close ally. I agree with that, but like it or not, Tony, you know, we have a lot of common joint interest with the Americans, don't we?
No, not really. We've embraced a bully. Look, you embrace a bully, Nigel, you have to be in compliance all the time, because then they start to bully you. It is that simple. I think we're in the 21st century. You know, we've gone round the world. We've caused a war zone in the Middle East. We've got thousands of children, men, women and children drowning at sea. We did that, all down to America. When I get MPs in the cab, do you know what I say to them, Nigel? I love it. You'll love this. They get out with steam coming out their ears.
I take it, Tony, you're a black cab driver, are you?
I'm a black licensed cab driver. I say to them, do you think we'd have invaded Iraq if they were growing bananas? What do you think, cabby? Oh, no, sir. Oil, sir, oil.
Tony, I tell you what, next time I'm hailing a black cab, if it's you, I'm going to have to be on my top form, aren't I?
You will. Just look out for that. I've got a little Cuban flag flying on the... I'm a revolutionary. The problem is, you know, we're desperate for a revolution in this country, but we've got no French blood, Nigel. French blood, because we do.
Well, we did show a bit of that fighting spirit in the referendum, Tony. We did manage to defeat the establishment for once. Listen, thank you, Tony, for your strong point of view, and Tony saying it's obvious what's going to happen. If he gets out, he'll be extradited, which is why he isn't going anywhere in a hurry. Mark in Thornton Heath says, this judge seems to be very arrogant by saying he should have the courage to go to a British court. Is she aware? The US said getting hold of Assange is a priority. Has she bothered to find out if the US has issued an extradition request? I find it impossible, Mark in Thornton Heath, to think that she wouldn't know whether that extradition warrant was out there or not. I find it impossible to believe. On Twitter, Jamie says, let America go into the embassy and take him to Gitmo, Guantanamo, for interrogations. Well, that would be breaching, of course, international diplomatic law, which is why he's able to stay holed up there. The government can suspend the embassy, do it for long enough to be arrested, and send him to the USA to face trial like other criminals, says Chris. Well, certainly one thing, Julian Assange does provoke very strong responses from all of you. Mark is calling from Chelsea. Good evening, Mark.
Nigel, evening.
Good evening.
What can you say about Julian Assange? Someone that was put through the process in this country and then done a runner to an embassy. Can we all do that? Can we all run to an embassy?
No.
Away from justice?
No, we can't, Mark. I mean, I have to say, I have had very strong reservations myself about the use of European arrest warrants. I've seen people taken off and chucked in Greek prisons for a year without even facing charge. But, Mark, no, jumping bail is a bad thing to do. Of course it is. No question about that.
Do you know what, Nigel, can I just say one thing? He would have been out by now because of the charges that was brought against him about, it was to do with sexual abuse, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Originally.
Well, it was, and actually, in the end, there was not enough evidence, and the time period for that warrant just simply ran out.
Well, I just think he's sitting in a prison cell there, which he is.
Yep.
If he had the guts to do it, he should be a man of guts and come out, face justice in this country, come out. Do you know what? He'd get a slap on the hand if he comes out.
Mark, look, I agree with that, of course. You know, I think, as I said earlier on this show, I think at the drop of a hat, he would walk out into Knightsbridge and face the UK authorities for jumping bail, and also have to face some of those people that put money up to bail him, because they're not going to be very happy with him, are they? You know, including some quite well-known people, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's not the issue, Mark. That isn't what it's about.
He's worried about having to face justice over in America.
Yes.
But the thing is, no one knows if there's a warrant there for his arrest to go to America.
Well, I tell you who does know, Mark. I'll tell you who knows for certain whether there is a warrant for his arrest or not. The UK government.
Yeah, exactly.
So shouldn't they...
Not even saying nothing about it.
Well, Mark, my argument is, look, shouldn't the UK government come clean on this? Shouldn't the judge today have come clean on this? It's all well and good saying, have the courage to come out and face charges for jumping bail. I get that. I understand every word she said. But surely when it comes to this potential extradition warrant to the States, he deserves to know the truth.
Yeah, well, definitely, because we do want to know that. You would,
yeah.
I would,
well, that's right.
Would.
So why will the UK government and the UK courts not say anything?
Well, because, do you know what, Nigel? It's very strange. Maybe there's nothing there.
Or maybe they're scared, of not doing what the Americans want them to do.
Well, maybe just sweating, they're just leaving him sweating in a little box there, which and as you said, Nigel, you've been there, you've seen him there, you've actually interviewed him there.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't want to stay there, would you?
Oh.
He's serving a prison sentence in that.
Oh, you know, I mean, actually, in many ways, Mark, being in there is worse than being in prison. It's all well and good earlier people saying, well, there's a balcony and etc. But actually, at least in prison, you've got places, you know, where you can go and exercise for a bit and all the rest of it. It's a pretty awful place. Mark, I thank you for your call. And I do think a lot of you agree with me that the UK authorities aren't being fair. Why? That's the question. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's now 7:45. Julian Assange, he raises strong passions, not least of which today at Westminster Magistrates Court from District Judge Emma Arbuthnot, who said Assange should have the courage, after more than 5 years holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy, to come out and face justice, because he's jumped bail in this country, costing quite a few people quite a lot of money. But it's not about that, is it? It's actually about the US dimension. WikiLeaks putting out all these American intelligence and military and governmental secrets, and he fears there is an extradition warrant to send him to America. But the judge and the UK government will say nothing about that. It's suggested here to me we should have an in-out referendum on Assange. Yeah, the trouble is, whichever way it went, you get the establishment want to rerun it, just like they are for Brexit. No, it's a Brexit-free zone tonight, I promise you folks. George is on the line from Tottenham. Good evening, George.
Nigel, fantastic show.
That's
I'm absolutely fuming with this subject at the moment. Justice. There's no justice. That judge should have said to Assange, there is an extradition order from America and you're going back to America if you come out. You know and I know and the English public know that if he goes back there, he won't get a 5 or 10 year sentence. He'll get a 175-year sentence.
Minimum,
now,
George.
Minimum. Now, don't you and the rest of the public, don't you want to know that phone call that Bush made to Blair, telling Blair to accept, us to go to war? I'd love to know the inside story of stories like that. I mean, this is ridiculous when the American government pulls the wool over our eyes. But I just want to make one more final point.
So, George, are you saying to me then, George, in the light of that conversation between Bush and Blair over Iraq, you're suggesting that WikiLeaks in some ways can do us a favour, yeah?
Absolutely do us a favour, because how many good servicemen died because of a bad decision by Blair? Absolutely ridiculous, and he's never been brought to justice because of that. At the end of the day,
Well, government, I guess, George, and I didn't agree with it at the time, I have to say, but I guess governments, prime ministers do make decisions, don't they?
They do. But let me tell you something. If he was going to go back to America and he was going to face Trump, I think he'd have a fair trial, because Trump's got nothing to hide. The Clintons, the Bushes, and all those American presidents have got so much to hide. Yeah. They don't want him to come out. But I think Trump would actually...
Well, that's interesting, actually. In some ways, George, you make a very good point. In some ways, Trump has got his own battles against the deep state in America, hasn't he?
He absolutely has. And I think, he's the man of the people, and I think he'd do all right. But listen, at the end of the day, Assange should be released, and that should be the end of it. But what's wrong with the truth?
Well, you say released, but actually he's in self-imposed form of imprisonment, isn't he? George, I thank you very much indeed for your call. Why won't the Aussies take responsibility for him? Well, yes, of course, he has an Australian passport. It's a very good point. Some people are bonkers. To ask judges to have compassion for criminal offenders is ludicrous. Well, yeah, I mean, I am certainly not saying that the judge today lacked compassion. What she didn't do was come clean on the big question of whether there is an American warrant or not, and nobody in the British government will do so. Is it a good defence to hide in an embassy? Asked Tony on Twitter. No, not really, but that's where he is, and he's back there again tonight, and I suspect, if we discuss this again in a couple of years, he's still going to be there, it seems to me, which is pretty blooming miserable. He should take the risk and leave. He would get lots of support. That's interesting. The US would be shouted down. Well, you might find that actually not everybody in America would be against him either. Daniel is calling from Stoke Newington. Good evening.
Good evening. I was wondering if you had been for or against the Vietnam War, Nigel.
Too young. What I will say is that Harold Wilson is a complete hero, because in 1966, when Lyndon Johnson came to Downing Street and said, as part of the special relationship and our closest ally, you will send troops to Vietnam, and the Labour Prime Minister said, oh, no, we won't. And that's the point about our special relationship with America. We can say yes, and we can say no.
There was another part to my point too. What did you think of Daniel Ellsberg? What do you think of Daniel Ellsberg now? Many years on.
I don't. Because let's talk about Assange, Daniel.
Daniel Ellsberg is extremely relevant to the Assange situation.
Go on.
As is Bradley Manning, because they were both leakers of information about wars that the public ought to have known more about. So this is why I'm asking.
No. But Daniel, there is a difference here, isn't there, between people who steal information. I mean.
Well,
you could argue.
He was doing it in the
public
good.
Daniel.
No, wait, I'm not finished. This was the whole point about Bradley Manning and Julian Assange. They were both doing it for the public good. They weren't doing it for malicious reasons. They were doing it against wars that were clearly wrong.
Well, I was going to try and help support your argument for a bit, Daniel, if you'll listen, which is this: that actually you could say that Assange publishing this information is rather like a newspaper editor who gets a leak about some corruption scandal in the government and publishes it. So you could, on the plus side for Assange, say he himself is not the one that stole this information. The Mannings and others did, but he himself actually acted as the publisher here. The trouble is, there was no one anywhere to put any limits on what was published. And isn't that the problem, Daniel? Aren't there limits?
No, there was actually. That's incorrect.
Go on.
There were members of WikiLeaks that were trying to get the information redacted. Actually, there have been a couple of books produced about what happened with WikiLeaks. One was written by Assange's associate Daniel Schmidt, and I'd recommend that you and your listeners all read that book. To be honest, there was going to be a load of redactions made.
But Daniel, to my knowledge, and you know more about this than I do, to my knowledge, those redactions were not made, were they?
Well, actually, some of them were. Yes, they were.
Were they?
Yes, completely. There's also another book called This Machine Kills Secrets, which, again, I would recommend that you read. It's written by Andy Greenberg, and it mentions a lot of background information about WikiLeaks.
So, Daniel, overall, overall, you're making the argument, are you not, that WikiLeaks has been a force for good, not bad?
I would say that in the case of the Iraq War, yes, absolutely, WikiLeaks was a force for good, totally. And I think Assange has had an absolutely appalling time of it.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I sense, Daniel, had a fair bit of WikiLeaks been redacted, he'd be in a much stronger position. I thank you for that. And probably my last call this evening is Loic, who's calling from Paris. Good evening, Loic.
Good evening, Nigel. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. I am just a bit mystified as to why the UK judiciary doesn't come a bit more clean about the US side of this.
Well, I find there is no... Where is the US side? He has been absolved of the charges in Sweden. They've dropped the case against him.
Yep.
He's come to the UK, and he has broken a UK law.
Yes.
It's as simple as that. He has skipped bail. He hasn't paid it. And he's been living quite comfortably in the Ecuadorian embassy in Knightsbridge in Kensington for 5 years now. He gets to go on the terrace. He's got unlimited visitors. He has access to the gym. He's not supervised at night. He is not... You can't equate staying 5 years in the Ecuadorian embassy as being equivalent to doing 5 years in an actual prison.
Well, that would depend, Loic, whether it's a high security prison or not. But anyway, you know, go on.
Well, for the charges that were brought up against him, the rape allegations, he would have gone to somewhere equivalent to Wormwood Scrubs. And he would have certainly not have lived in the comfortable position he lived in for the last 5 years.
Okay, but those charges were found to have a lack of evidence, so let's forget that.
Exactly.
Is he in the wrong? Is he in the wrong for jumping bail? Yes. Were the judge's comments about that today appropriate? I think yes. But it's actually about America, isn't it, really?
The judge said in her statement that she did not find substantial evidence to consider it true that there would be a U.S. element involved. And there would be such a complicated amount of bureaucracy and international treaties for extradition that I can't imagine the UK or Sweden would go through with extradition for...
Well, do you know what, Loic? I've heard what you've said. And if that's the case, and you're right, why on earth don't the UK government just simply say that? Loic, I thank you. I thank all of you. Everyone forgets that the Ecuadorian Parliament have said they're fed up with Assange being in their embassy, calling him a problem, says Paul. Paul, I've no doubt he is a problem to them. I just don't see it changing any time soon. Any of it, actually. You've been listening to The Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. I'm back tomorrow night at 7. Coming up at 10 o'clock tonight, it's Ian Collins. But up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you.